That's the world Jordan Peterson lives in. Everything is metaphor. Everything is archetype. What is coffee? Well, coffee is kind of like tea and it's kind of like hot water, but it's not one of those two. There are types, there are flavors to coffee. His whole world is metaphor, 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 metaphor. He's trapped in the world of metaphors. And he's right. The whole world, in a way, is a metaphor, except one. If I told you, Sabur, there's only one knife in the world, this knife is a divine knife. This knife, there is no other knife like it. There will never be another knife like it. And there is never was a knife like it. This one knife is the only knife in existence, and it doesn't transform. It doesn't change. So, for instance, Sabur, there are other men, but even Sabur in himself is a metaphor. Why? Sabur is very different than when he was 5 years old. And he's very different now than when he's going to be 90 years old. So Hume told us, look, Sabur is like a link of chains. His mind is like a link. Yeah. You can't say any part of the chain is the chain. The whole chain is the chain. And you could look at all the links in the chain and make an archetype of it and say, look, Sabur is about this. His mind is kind of like this. If you look at his whole life, the average Sabur, the way he was on average, his archetype was this. Was he a good guy or a bad guy? Well, let's look at his average. Let's look at every link in the chain. You're one link being linked to another, and you're making a whole chain. There's no nucleus to the chain. You're a type of vapor. You're a type of metaphor. You're a type of archetype, and that's the world. I know I'm rehashing it, but I want to make it so crystal clear.
Yeah.
Peterson lives in this world. Everything is metaphor. What do you mean by do? Do is a metaphor. Do has an archetype, and he's so right about this. Now let me tell you one thing. You only know up because you know down. You only know left because you know right.
Yeah.
You only know metaphor because you know Allah. Allah is not metaphor. Allah is concrete. Let me expand on this. When Allah tells you I'm one, He's telling you I have no archetype. I have no metaphor. I am literal. I am literal. If there was a divine knife that never changed, if I had the qualities of Allah and ask you how long is a knife, now you would just describe that divine knife, and anything you said about it would be objectively true. It's no longer subjective. Because if I asked you how long is a knife, you'd have to, well, earthly knives, well, that's subjective. That's relative. They have to follow a certain archetype. The story of Cain and Abel follows an archetype. Brothers are still killing their brothers. Men are still killing their brothers like they did in the past. So he's referring to the archetype. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
We're referring to the particular and the archetype.
Yeah.
There's particulars and there are archetypes. Allah is telling you, look, I'm not a multiplicity of gods. I'm not a trinity. If there was a trinity, there would be an archetype. If there was an archetype, now we're in metaphor. Is Allah a metaphor? When God is telling you in the Quran, He's one. When He's telling you He's one in the Torah, He's saying, I am literal. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. Nothing in the dunya is like Allah, because everything in the dunya is in transition and has an archetype. It's metaphorically true. There's a concept attached to it. We attach a concept to knives. I could draw that concept on a piece of paper. You're like, yeah, that's the concept I hold within my mind about knives. Allah has try to draw Allah on a piece of paper. You cannot.
Can't even
That's
think.
the whole point. That's the whole point of Allah. You only know Allah. You only know God. You only know metaphor because you know Allah. Now, I tell the people, once upon a time when you're in the womb of your mother, you know nothing about your identity. Identity, psychologists tell us, is developed near the age of 1 year old. As you're creeping up to the age of 1 year old, you start realizing, hey, there's me and there's the rest of the world. Before you heard, before you saw, before you had any sensory data about anything in the world, before you knew anything about up, down, left, right, hot, cold, warm, you know about Allah. You were gestated in the unity, the oneness of Allah. The Prophet ﷺ taught us every human being is born upon the fitrah. Yeah. I knew the fitrah, and then I compared it to my first worldly experiences. They're like this. They're the opposite to this oneness. They're the opposite. Jesus in the Bible, alayhi salam, is quoted as saying, and this I can believe he said, this part I believe he might have said,
yeah,
be born again. What does it mean, be born again? Go back to your fitrah. They interpret it differently, but I don't accept these interpretations. Be born again to me means go back to your natural, innate religion that you were born in. that the Quran is pointing you to. The Quran is a revealed religion, but Islam is also a natural religion. The two, the two are in coherence.
Mm-hmm.
The Quran, our natural religion, and logic, science, deduction, all has to be coherent.
Yeah.
It has to be correspondent. It has to be coherent, and above all, it is pragmatic. It is pragmatic. Okay. Now, ultimately speaking, one day a man comes to a realization that there is the one, Allah, and the many, and the one is unlike the many. Every single object of the many, every particular of the many, has an archetype, is a concept, is a metaphor, is changing. The one, in contrast, is unchanging, eternal, objective. Allah is Al Haq. What does it mean, Al Haq? Allah is the truth. When we talk about this thing called truth, we're talking about Allah. Allah is objectively true. Every other truth is true to a certain degree, is objectively true to a certain degree, but never fully objective like Allah. Allah is literal. He's the first and the last. He was there before all these particulars that we observe, and He'll be there after the particulars.
Allahu Akbar.
He's unchanging and eternal. Perfection is never adjusted. This oneness, you've experienced it. Now, when you see the particulars, you say, oh, that's Allah, this is Allah, this is Allah. No, you're completely wrong. Allah was known before you knew the particulars. Before. And I challenge anybody to try to cross-examine me on this. They would be eventually trying to come up with the number 10 without using the number 1.
Yeah.
There is no number other than the number 1. There's one and a copy of every other number trying to be like the number 1. The number 10 is telling you, look, I'm 1 repeated 10 times. But you cannot explain 10 without the number 1. 1 is the foundation of all. Even if you say 0.5, 0.5 is referring to 1. All numbers are referring to 1. The dunya, the Quran says, all the dunya is praising Allah. The whole dunya is referring to the 1. All subjectivity is referring to objectivity. If everything was subjective, you wouldn't know it. The fact that you know that there's subjectivity is because you know objectivity. You've experienced objectivity. The fitrah is screaming.
Yeah.
Look, I did this on Blogging Theology, but ultimately speaking, your belief in math, your belief in science, your belief in abduction, deduction, all of it, it's all fitrah. It all goes back to fitrah. We trace it back to fitrah whether you like it or not. It's all pointing back to Allah. All of it. Regardless of what your philosophies are. Ultimately speaking, everything you know is based on the fitrah. That's why when you do sujood, when Muslims put their head on the floor, the mind is lower than the heart. How do you know the fitrah? You know it directly. Nobody gave you a logical argument for the fitrah. Nobody gave you a logical experiment. You're having a first-hand experience of it. There's no words. Our words only point to it. Just like a blind man, I could never give him a logical argument to know the color red. Unless I show him red, he'll never know red. No matter how intelligent he is, no matter how articulate I am, explaining what is the color red, he has to experience it. The same way when I talk to you about Allah, you've experienced Allah. Not Zeus, not Thor. That's your idea of God mixed with the lightning. God of lightning. Thor is the God of lightning. The God of crocodiles, the God of war, the God of love. You took something you saw in the dunya and you mixed it with the idea of Allah. That's why the Quran says, make no partnerships with Allah. Don't bring anything. You'll be back to your natural religion. You'll be certain now. You'll have certainty. And let me tell you something. There's no greater joy than having certainty. There's no greater joy. I don't have any mathematical certainty. I don't have any empirical certainty. I don't have any scientific certainty. I don't have any logical certainty. I don't believe I'm the greatest logician. Allah is known to us by way of mercy, grace. And no man can tell you, hey, you need to learn from me if you want to know about Allah. You were born knowing about Allah. Men can only remind you about Allah. Men can only remind you about Allah. The Prophet ﷺ recited the Quran as a reminder to us of what? The Quran says, before we came into this earth, we gave a shahada. Allah asked us, am I not your Lord? We all said yes. We're all born with this innate belief. I hope Jordan Peterson discovers this. And this will trump all his metaphors. Because his metaphors are only known because he has an innate belief of the singularity, the objective single truth. They all compare. They're all comparison. They're all referring to back this one truth. How could you know the number 10 if you don't already know the number 1? Everything is subjective to Peterson. Everything is up to scrutiny. Everything is true enough, correct enough. Never ultimately true. He's correct on this. As long as he says, La ilaha illallah, there's only one objective truth we can be certain of. Everything else, we're doing our best. We're doing our best. Once you come upon this certainty, you can never have a doubt again. You will never have a doubt again. There's Allah and then everything else. This is what it means. La ilaha illallah. There is no other. Guys, let me tell you something, guys. Islam is very close to atheism. Very close. The Prophet ﷺ discarded us from every pagan. The Arabs, he discarded us from every pagan belief. But there's one God we cannot reproach. There's one, the only one. We cannot. Here, doubt is proof. Listen carefully to this. Here, doubt is proof. I'm going to say something now and then I'll be quiet because I know I'm talking too long. We
That's
all
wonderful stuff, though.
we all within us have a point of awareness. There's a point of awareness within all of us. Think about that. This singular point, the idea of point and the idea of within is also contained in it. The whole world is contained in it. Even my flesh is contained in it. Actually, it contains everything and nothing contains it. You think it's within. It's not within. It's not within. It's apparently within. That's okay. It's apparently within. This awareness encompasses all. There are not two awarenesses. There is one awareness. It's singular. When you come upon this natural theology, the Quran makes sense. Trinities break my ears. Polytheism breaks my ears. I don't see any polytheism at all. I don't see any multiple persons. I don't see any of this. I don't see any of this. I can verify the Quran for you personally. I was born upon this faith. I know I have a direct verification of it. The Quran says, look up at the universe, look up at the sky, the heavens, and your vision will come back to you humbled. You won't find any rifts. I'll tell you why. The Quran is responding to certain pagans believe that space was like the blackness of space was a type of tarp, and there were little cracks in the tarp, and you saw heaven. The stars were basically little tears, and there was heaven on the other side. Now there are many myths. This is one of them. The Quran is saying no. These are not rifts or tears. There's no limit. You're not even seeing you think you're seeing the heavens. You think you're seeing paradise. This is nothing. You're gonna your vision will come back humbled. Why? Because you'll realize it'll come back to you humbled that you're experiencing the outer world within, and this within is also in appearance only. You're gonna have this self-referring paradox that you're going to realize that even you are contained in this singularity. And everything you've ever known, history, science, logic, it's all contained within this. And all you actually know, the only thing you actually know is this direct experience with this singularity. And then you'll truly understand the words, La ilaha illallah. Then you will truly understand, La ilaha illallah. You've never had an experience of two singularities. You've only had, we're not talking about the contents of consciousness. That's all dunya. We're talking about this one point of awareness that no sophisticated machine, AI, will ever have. I have the robot experiment. We've talked about it. I've tried to give this thought experiment to try to make people understand this. Nothing you can do, the most complex machines will never have this point of awareness. Now, the Quran and Ayat al-Nur recites it beautifully. I won't go into it now because I'm talking too long, but we have this point of awareness, and you cannot go wrong. You cannot go wrong about your faith in one God. Everything depends on this point. Everything, the singularity, everything. Even philosophers admit to this. They call it They call it the egocentric predicament.